All right, guys, these are going to be my 5 go-to warm-ups for deadlift. I really like to focus on engaging top to bottom for the deadlift. So the first thing that we're gonna do is gonna be banded good mornings. You can find these bands anywhere at Decathlon. You can order them online for like 10 to 15 bucks American. I use these in every single warm-up that I do for every single lift. So even if you're at home, these are great to have on hand. So the first thing that we're gonna do is banded good mornings. There's 2 ways that you can do this depending on the strength of your band. My way that I like to go to, if it's a smaller band with less resistance, is we're gonna pull it tight together like this, and then we're gonna step on our band. We wanna make sure that we have the same width with our feet that we're gonna have for the deadlift. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna step on it right here, and I'm gonna grab it like handles. We're gonna stand up really tall. The first thing I want you guys to think about is activating your core nice and tight and keeping your lats locked back really tight. You don't wanna let the band pull us down. So what we're gonna do after that, just like with the deadlift, is we're gonna unlock our knees, send our hips back, keeping our head neutral. We're gonna look at the ground and pull back up nice and tight. So you guys want to feel the stretch in your hamstring. Send your hips back as far as you can, keeping your head neutral. Pull it nice and tight. What we don't want to do is allow that band to pull us over and around our back. We want to keep that tension pulled in nice and tight. So I'm going to do about 5 reps of these, nice and slow. You don't want to rush this movement. You want to allow your hamstrings and your quads to fire off correctly. So 1, 2, focusing on keeping my core locked back and my lats nice and tight. 3, squeezing my butt at the top. 4, and last one, I'm gonna hold nice and tight. 5. So that's the banded good morning warm up for the deadlift. Hi guys, Amber with Barbell Beauties here. Okay, we're gonna do another deadlift warm up that's super, super important that sometimes is overlooked when we're lifting weights. We're going to work on scap retractions today. So first I'm gonna start out and show you a common mistake that people make when they're deadlifting. When we're deadlifting, a lot of times we're focused so much on our lower body that we're not focused on our upper body position, keeping our core and keeping our lats and our scaps locked in and tight. So sometimes when you watch people deadlift, you're gonna see their pull from the ground and they immediately lose their chest position and their scap and their lat position. What that does when I'm rounded in this position is it takes the bar away from my body and brings my upper back up, and that's where a lot of us tend to get injured in our deadlift. The proper way to do it is to keep that bar nice and close. And how to do that is to keep your lats and your scaps nice and tight. That allows the bar to stay really close to our body and keeps our back in a safe position to avoid injury. So with this warm up, I like to do about 3 sets of 10 to 15 scap retractions before I start deadlifting. You don't want to go too heavy, but you want to go heavy enough to where you can feel your muscles contracting and keeping everything nice and tight. So I've chosen 10-pound dumbbells for today. What we're gonna do is we're gonna have them at an angle just like this, unlock our knees, push our hips back like we're in a deadlift position, and all we're gonna do is let our arms be long like chains. We're gonna pull back nice and tight, about 10 to 15 scap retractions. A really good thing to do in this drill is to hold at the top for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and release. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and release. What that does is allows us to engage our lats, making sure that when we pick up the bar, we know the proper position to have the deadlift in. Okay guys, so the next warm-up drill we're gonna do for deadlifts that's super important is gonna be a stiff-legged deadlift. You can do this with the barbell. I prefer to do it with a kettlebell. I think it keeps everything closer and tighter together, and it's a really good way to get our posterior chain activated. So our posterior chain is gonna be from here to here. Super important, that's the biggest thing that we use in a deadlift. So what we're gonna do with a stiff-legged deadlift is really work on engaging our glutes, hamstrings, and our lower back. So how we're gonna approach this is gonna be the same way as we approach the deadlift. Super important that all of the warm-up drills we do, we think about our positioning with our feet, because that's gonna be the angle at which we engage everything in. So we're gonna start with keeping our feet about equal to the kettlebell. Same thing, unlock our knees. Back is gonna be totally straight. We're gonna grab that kettlebell, keeping our lats locked back. We just warmed those up. Keeping our hamstrings engaged. And we're gonna lift the kettlebell up, staying in a super tight position. We're gonna send our hips back, keeping our legs straight as possible without arching our upper back. Just like this. So what we're working on right now is really getting those hamstrings to fire off. We wanna do this nice and slow. You guys should feel a super tight pull in your hamstrings. It shouldn't be painful, but you should really feel those hamstrings working hard to keep your body in a good position. So I'm gonna do about 5 of them, and keep notice of my lower back and my T-spine and how I stay in a tight, engaged position from head to toe. So we're gonna do about 5 of them. I'm keeping my lats locked in nice and tight to my chest, sending my hips back, keeping my whole foot on the floor, and my head is in a neutral position, staring at the floor the entire time. I'm gonna go through some common errors really quick in this, because stiff-legged deadlifts are a little bit hard to do, and sometimes if we get into a bad position, it can set us up to not be in such a great position for a deadlift. So sometimes when people do stiff-legged deadlifts, they want to keep their legs straight so bad that they overextend their body like this and around their lower back. When I do that, it doesn't engage my hamstrings. So I want to make sure when I'm doing my stiff-legged deadlifts that I'm keeping my lats locked in nice and tight. Another error that people can tend to do in a stiff-legged deadlift is tilt their head up. And I want you guys to watch what it does to my lower back when I tilt my head up during stiff-legged deadlift. So if my head is up during stiff-legged deadlift, all of a sudden my spine is in a round curve, I can't even find the kettlebell, round curve position, and I'm not engaged. My core is not engaged because I'm overarching. So again, proper positioning is gonna be head neutral to the ground, lats are engaged, back is nice and straight, legs are nice and straight, head is neutral. This is gonna set us up for the perfect position to do our deadlifts. Boom. Hey guys, all right, the last mobility drill we're gonna do for a deadlift is gonna be the banded hip flexor drill. I love this one the most. It's my go-to for squats and deadlifts every single time that I lift. So you wanna find a post, you can use a railing, anything that's super sturdy, and you're gonna take your handy dandy band and you're gonna attach it at about knee height. So typically that's about hip height too when you're down on your knee. So just remember that. So I'm gonna attach it right here to the top of this post. You wanna make sure you pull it tight so there's no slack on the band. And then I'm gonna go ahead and step in, and I'm gonna put it right up in my hip crease. You don't want it too low because we're not gonna get the proper pull on the stretch. So we're gonna attach it right at my hip crease like this, and I'm gonna pull the tension out of the band. So it should feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I'm gonna take about 2 to 3 steps forward just like this. The first stretch that I'm gonna do is gonna be a standing hamstring resistance stretch. So I'm gonna put my leg out in front of me, and I'm gonna reach down and touch my toes, and I'm actually gonna hold this stretch for about 10 to 15 seconds. I'm reaching down as much as I can. You should feel a ton of resistance on the band pulling back on your hamstring, really getting maximal stretch out of your hamstring and tightness in your hip flexor. So I'm gonna hold down for about 10 seconds. And then I'm gonna stand back up. I'm gonna shake it out. And I'm gonna step forward even more, getting more resistance on the band. And I'm gonna reach down and hold again for about 10 to 30 seconds. Just like that. And then I'm gonna go ahead and switch sides. Same thing, stepping out to get resistance, reaching down and stretching. And depending on where you're tight, you might feel it more in the front of your hip flexor, in the back of your back hamstring, or in the front of your hamstring on the front leg. This is a great way to get your hamstrings to start firing off for that deadlift and get them to work against the tension. The same tension of a pull that you have in a deadlift is gonna be the same tension of resistance that you feel in this stretch right here. So again, 10 to 15 seconds. I'm gonna stand up, shake it out, allow that muscle to expand a little bit, step a little bit farther, and reach down and hold it for about 10 to 30 seconds. Again, you shouldn't feel any pain. If you feel like you have pain in the back of your knee, that means that you might be a little bit too far out. But if you feel it in your hamstrings, then that means that you're in a good position and you're really engaging and letting those muscles fire off. And then the next stretch that we're gonna do with the banded hip flexor stretch is I'm gonna switch legs again. And I'm gonna come out the same way that I did before, only I'm gonna set my knee to the ground this time. So what we engaged before with the standing banded hip flexor stretch was our hamstring. This time we're gonna engage our glutes and our hip flexors. So I'm gonna come out as far as I can without it pulling me back. Set my front leg out. I'm gonna push against the band with my hip flexor, and then I'm gonna set my hands down on the ground. And I'm gonna hold this for about, again, 10 to 15 seconds. What you can do in this stretch, if you want even a little bit more mobility, is you can do 5 circles to the left, 5 to the right. You shouldn't have any pain with this stretch, but you should feel your glutes engaging really hard when you're doing this, and you should feel your quads firing off. So 10 to 15 seconds on the front or more, depending on how bad your tightness is in your hips that day. Then we're gonna stand up nice and slow, depending on the strength of your band. You don't wanna stand up too fast. Pulling out, again, I'll show you the setup. Step out as far as you can. Switch legs, back knee down. Again, I'm gonna stretch against that band. This is the one time that you can let your posterior chain go a little bit, meaning your core and your lower back, and really arch into that position to get that hip flexor to warm up. And while you're doing this, you want to squeeze your glute as tight as you possibly can to start engaging the hip flexor. When my glute is tight, that's what engages the hip flexor. I'm going to put my hands down, and I can do 5 to 10 circles on one side and 5 to 10 circles on the other side. And that's the banded hip flexor warm-up. All right, guys, so that was our deadlift warm-up. Those are my go-tos. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions, please reach out to Barbell Beauties on Instagram.